I remember the smell of jet fuel, that sharp metallic scent that sticks to your clothes long after you leave the airport. That's what I remember most from the day she left. It was August 12th, 1978. I was 26, standing in Terminal C of Cleveland Hopkins Airport, holding a small velvet box in my hand. Inside was an engagement ring, simple, silver, engraved with the letters EC. I had spent 6 months saving for it. That day was supposed to be the start of our future. Instead, it became the day mine stopped. She told me she met someone with a future. Those were her exact words. With a future. I can still hear her voice when I close my eyes, soft, almost apologetic, like she was trying to make a heartbreak sound polite. My name's Jack Renner, and that was the day I learned what it means to lose everything without dying. I sat there for hours in one of those cold plastic airport chairs, just staring at the runway. I didn't cry. Not then. I just couldn't believe it was happening. A few people glanced my way, probably wondering what kind of fool sits in an airport for hours holding a ring. But I couldn't move. I just couldn't. For years, I kept that ring in the same box, in the same drawer. Every now and then, I'd take it out, wipe off the dust, and wonder where she went, what she became, whether she ever thought of me. I never married, never even came close. Fast forward 44 years, 2022. I'm 70 years old, retired, living in the same small Ohio town where we grew up. I still work on old engines in my garage just to keep my hands busy. My parents are gone. Most of my friends, too. Life's quiet now. Predictable. One night, I was sitting at my kitchen table scrolling through Facebook, something my nephew taught me to use. I had maybe 15 friends, all family. That's when I saw it. Claire Turner sent you a friend request. I almost ignored it. I don't add strangers. But something about the name Turner. It tugged at a memory. Then I saw her profile picture. My heart stopped. She looked exactly like Emily Carter, the woman who left me at the airport in 1978. Same smile, same green eyes, same dimple when she smiled. I dropped my phone, literally dropped it on the table. My first thought was, is this some kind of cruel joke? But then I noticed her bio. Teacher, Chicago, daughter of Emily Turner. Emily Carter, her maiden name, became Emily Turner when she married that man she'd left me for. I knew that name. I'd seen it once, years ago, in the local paper. Emily Turner, wife of Chicago entrepreneur Thomas Turner. I remember folding that newspaper and throwing it away without reading the rest. And now, decades later, her daughter had found me. I didn't click, accept, not right away. I just stared at her photo. My hands were shaking. I could feel that same ache in my chest, the one I'd felt at the airport all those years ago. I whispered to myself, Emily, what are you doing to me again? I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking, why now? Did Emily tell her about me? Did she know what happened between us? Did she even know I existed? Around 3 a.m., I went to my dresser, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out that same velvet box. The ring was still there, a little tarnished, but still shining when it caught the light. The engraving inside, EC, was faint but visible. I turned the ring over in my hand, remembering the way Emily's eyes had sparkled the night I first showed it to her. She'd smiled and said, "You didn't have to do this, Jack. I'd marry you with a paper ring if you asked." And yet, there I was, 44 years later, holding the same ring for a woman who never became my wife. The next morning, I made a decision. I clicked accept. Seconds later, I got a message. "Hi, Mr. Renner. You don't know me, but I think you knew my mom. Emily Turner. She talked about you before she passed away." My hands went numb. I could barely type. I just sat there, reading those words over and over. Emily passed away. After all those years, she was gone. And her daughter, had found me. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went to that same drawer, took out the ring, snapped a picture, and sent it to her. The caption was simple. It still has your mother's initials. And that's when everything changed. When I think back to 1978, before that day at the airport, life felt simple. Almost too simple to ever imagine it could fall apart. I lived in a small town called Brookside, Ohio, about an hour west of Cleveland. Back then, everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where if you sneezed on Main Street, 3 people would bless you before you stopped. I worked at my dad's garage, Renner & Son Auto Repair. The sign was faded even then, but the customers kept coming because my dad, Robert Renner, could fix anything with wheels. I was proud to work beside him. The smell of oil, the hum of the compressor, the clang of tools, that was home. My father always said, "A good day's work should end with grease on your hands and peace in your mind." He was a quiet man, not big on emotions, but he loved my mom, Helen, like she hung the moon. Mom was the heart of our home. She'd bring us sandwiches around noon and scold us for working through lunch. She adored Emily, my fiancée. Every time Emily stopped by, Mom would light up like Christmas morning. Emily Carter. She was 23, a third-grade teacher at Brookside Elementary, the kind of woman who made everyone feel like they were the only person in the room when she talked to them. Blonde hair, green eyes, always a smudge of chalk dust on her sleeve from the classroom. She was kindness wrapped in ambition. We met at the county fair 3 summers before the airport. She was running a charity booth for her school, and I was there with a few friends from the garage. She caught me, trying to win her a teddy bear from one of those impossible ring toss games. I must have spent $10 before she finally leaned over and said, "You know, you could just buy me a funnel cake instead." I did, and that was the start. By 1978, we'd been together for 3 years. Everyone in town called us the forever couple. We'd sit on the hood of my Chevy truck by the river after work, talking about our dreams, a small house, maybe 2 kids, a garden in the back. Emily loved the idea of painting the nursery yellow. "So it'll work either way," she used to say with a laugh. We didn't have much money, but we had plans. I'd saved every extra dollar from the garage for the ring. It wasn't flashy, just a simple silver band with a small diamond and her initials, EC, engraved inside. I still remember the day I picked it up from the jeweler. The man behind the counter looked at me and said, "Whoever she is, son, she's lucky." I believed him. We'd set a date for September, a church wedding, nothing fancy. Mom was already sewing lace on her old wedding dress to give to Emily. Dad even agreed to close the shop for 2 days, something he hadn't done since his own wedding. Everything was lined up. Except, looking back, there were small things I ignored. Little cracks I didn't want to see. Emily had started spending more time in Cleveland on weekends, saying she was taking night courses for her master's degree. I was proud of her. She wanted to do more, be more. But there was something in her eyes that changed around that time, like she was looking at the horizon and seeing something I couldn't. One night, we were sitting on my porch. The air smelled like cut grass and gasoline, my 2 favorite scents, probably because both reminded me of work. She turned to me and said, "Jack, do you ever think about what else is out there, outside of Brookside?" I laughed and said, "Sure, but everything I want's right here." She smiled, but it was that kind of half-smile people make when they don't agree but don't want to argue. That's the thing about love. Sometimes it's so comfortable that you can't tell when it's starting to fade. I remember Mom saying once, "She's got big dreams, Jack. Make sure she finds room for you in them." I told her not to worry. Emily loved me, I was sure of it. In early August, Emily told me her cousin in New York was getting married, and she wanted to fly out to help with the wedding. I drove her to the airport that morning. She packed light, 1 suitcase, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Before she walked into the terminal, she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't forget to fix that old carburetor while I'm gone. You promised you'd have it running before September." I laughed. "I'll have it ready by the honeymoon." She smiled again, softer this time. "You're a good man, Jack." That should have been my warning. That was the last morning I saw her smile at me like that. When I think about those weeks before she left, it feels like watching an old home movie. Colors too bright, everyone laughing, not realizing the film's about to burn. At the time, I thought we were just two kids in love, waiting for life to start. I didn't know that for one of us. It already had, just in a different direction. It was August 12th, 1978, the day I drove Emily Carter to Cleveland Hopkins Airport. We were supposed to be talking about our wedding playlist. Instead, she barely spoke. I remember how she stared out the window the whole ride, her hand resting near the gear shift but not touching mine. I kept waiting for her to turn and smile like she used to. She didn't. The radio played Fleetwood Mac's Dreams. Funny how that song always comes on at the wrong time. "Everything all right?" I asked. She nodded but didn't look at me. "Yeah, just tired, I guess. Big week ahead," I said, trying to keep it light. "When you get back, we'll finally go taste cakes with Mom. She's been talking about lemon icing like it's world peace." That got a tiny laugh out of her, but it faded just as fast. We pulled into the parking lot, the hum of car engines and the sound of rolling suitcases filling the air. I remember the way she held her plane ticket, creased at the corners, like she'd been folding and unfolding it all morning. Inside, the terminal was crowded, people rushing, hugging, saying goodbye. I watched her eyes dart across the crowd like she was looking for someone. I told myself it was just nerves, but deep down, something cold began to stir in my stomach. At the check-in counter, I offered to wait with her until boarding. She smiled, a little too politely, and said, "Sure." We sat near gate 9. She kept glancing at her watch. I tried to fill the silence. I told her how Dad had been bragging about me at the diner. "My boy's getting married before 30, he'd said. I told her how Mom found a church pianist for the ceremony. I even pulled out a brochure for a honeymoon cabin by Lake Erie. She just stared at her hands. Finally, I leaned closer. "Emily, what's going on?" She looked up, her eyes glassy but calm. "Jack, there's something I need to tell you before I go." My chest tightened. "All right, what is it?" She inhaled deeply, then spoke softly. Too softly. "I met someone." I thought I misheard her. "What?" "In New York, a few months ago when I went for that teaching conference. His name's Thomas Turner. He offered me a position at a private school there." I stared at her, trying to make sense of the words. "What are you saying, Emily?" She swallowed hard, her voice trembling now. "I think I'm going to stay in New York, with him." The noise of the airport faded. I couldn't hear anything, not the announcements, not the crowd, just her voice, quiet and steady. "You're joking," I said, forcing a laugh. "You can't be serious. You're flying out for your cousin's wedding. You're coming back next week." Her eyes filled with tears. "Jack, I can't. He has a future planned out. He wants me to be part of it." The words with a future hit me like a punch, like I was some dead end she'd outgrown. I stood up, heart pounding. "A future? We have a future. We're a month away from our wedding. I've built my whole life around us." She shook her head. "You built your life here, Jack. And I love you for that, I really do. But I want something more. I want to see what else is out there before I wake up one day wondering what I missed." Her voice cracked. She stood too, eyes red, hands shaking. "I'm sorry." That's all she said, "I'm sorry." I wanted to scream, to beg, to do something. But all I could do was stare at her. The same woman who used to sit on my porch and plan baby names was now telling me she was leaving. Not for a trip, but for good. Then the boarding call echoed. Flight 217 to New York, now boarding. She turned away. I wanted to reach out, to grab her hand, but I couldn't move. My body felt made of stone. "Emily!" I called once, barely louder than a whisper. She looked back, just once, then turned and walked through the gate. And just like that, she was gone. I sat down in one of those hard blue chairs and opened my hand. The ring box was still there, warm from my palm. I opened it and stared at the silver band glinting under the fluorescent lights. Her initials, EC, looked almost cruel now. An elderly woman sitting across from me must have seen the look on my face. She leaned over and said, "Honey, did you miss your flight?" I shook my head. "No, ma'am, I just missed my life." I stayed there for hours, watching the planes take off one after another, each one roaring into the clouds, carrying someone else's future away. When I finally stood up, the sun was setting through the glass wall, painting the floor in gold and shadow. I closed the box, put it in my pocket, and walked out. That was the last time I ever saw Emily Carter. After that day at the airport, my life didn't end, it just stopped moving forward. I went back to Brookside that night, parked the Chevy in the driveway, and sat there with the engine off until the sky turned gray. The house lights were on. Mom was waiting inside, probably with questions I didn't have answers to. When I finally walked in, she took one look at my face and didn't ask a thing. She just hugged me and whispered, "It's all right, sweetheart. You're home." But home didn't feel like home anymore. Everything reminded me of Emily, the sandwich she'd half-eaten still in the fridge, the love notes she'd left on my toolbox, her handwriting on the wedding plans pinned to the corkboard in my room. I couldn't bring myself to throw anything away. Not then. For weeks, I'd wake up expecting to see her car in the driveway, like maybe she'd come back and say it was all a mistake. I replayed that moment at the airport over and over, her eyes, her voice, those words. He's got a future. I started working longer hours at the garage. Fixing engines became the only thing that made sense anymore. Machines were predictable. People weren't. My dad never brought up Emily, but I caught him once, standing in the doorway while I was tuning an old Ford, his face soft with worry. He said, "Son, sometimes the hardest part of life is knowing when to stop waiting." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. Years passed. The wedding date came and went. I worked, I saved, I stayed single. Friends got married, had kids, bought houses. I sent cards and gifts and smiled at the photos they showed me, but I always felt like I was watching through a window I couldn't open. I heard about Emily again around 1983. Her name appeared in the local paper. Chicago businessman Thomas Turner and wife Emily Carter Turner host education fundraiser. There was a picture of her, older, hair shorter, smile softer. I remember staring at that photo for a long time. She looked happy, or at least she looked finished, like she'd become someone complete without me. I folded the paper and threw it away, but that night I dreamed of her. Same airport, same goodbye. I woke up with the sound of her voice in my head. By the time my parents passed, first Dad in '92, then Mom 2 years later, I'd taken over the shop. I renamed it Renner Automotive, though the locals still called it Robert's Place. I poured my life into that business. When you spend enough time fixing broken things, you start to think maybe you can fix yourself too. But some breaks are permanent. Every once in a while, I'd take out that ring. The box was worn now, corners fraying, but the ring still shone like it did the day I bought it. The engraving, EC, was still there. I'd turn it over in my fingers, thinking about the life that never happened. The house by the river, the laughter, the family dinners. I never dated again. I told people I was too busy, that love wasn't for everyone. The truth was simpler. I'd already given mine away. Then came 2022. By then, the shop was quiet most days. I was 70 years old, mostly retired, spending mornings fixing up old cars for fun, and evenings watching reruns or scrolling through Facebook, something my nephew Aaron had set up for me so I could keep up with the world. That's when it happened. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my kitchen, coffee going cold, when my phone buzzed. A notification popped up. Claire Turner sent you a friend request. The name hit me like déjà vu. I didn't recognize the face at first, a woman in her 40s, bright smile, standing beside a classroom whiteboard. But those eyes, green, soft, familiar, Emily's eyes. I clicked her. Profile, teacher, Chicago, daughter of Emily Turner. I froze. My heart thudded in my chest. I whispered her name out loud, like saying it might make sense. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my recliner, scrolling through Claire's photos, family gatherings, school events, old snapshots of her mother. One picture stopped me cold. Emily, sitting on a park bench, silver hair brushed back, still smiling that same gentle smile from decades ago. It felt like time folded in on itself. 44 years collapsed into one moment. The next morning, I messaged her. Just 3 words. "Do I know you?" A few minutes later, the reply came. "You might have. My mom was Emily Turner. She told me about you before she passed away." I read it over and over, heart pounding. Emily had talked about me. After all those years, after her life went on, after she built her future, she still remembered the man she left at the airport. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a message. This was my moment to finally do something I should have done decades ago. I got up, walked to my dresser, and opened that old wooden box. The ring was there, same shine, same initials. I held it in my palm, thinking about the years, the silence, the waiting. Then I took a photo of it and sent it to Claire with a message that simply said, "It still has your mother's initials." When I sent that photo of the ring to Claire, I didn't expect anything in return. I figured she might think it was strange. An old man holding on to a memory from before she was even born. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But a few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Her message was short. "My mom told me you'd still have it." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The air around me felt heavy, still. I could almost hear Emily saying those words herself. She had told her daughter about the ring. About me. I sat there at the kitchen table, my old coffee gone cold, and read her next message. She said her mother had talked about me during her final months, that she'd carried a kind of quiet guilt her whole life. Emily had wanted to reach out but never did. "She thought you'd never forgive her," Claire wrote. That line hit me harder than anything else, because the truth was, I had forgiven her. I'd done it a long time ago, even if I never said it out loud. What hurt wasn't the leaving. It was never knowing whether she remembered me, whether I had been just a footnote in her story. Now, 44 years later, I finally knew. Claire told me that after her father passed away, Emily had begun writing letters she never sent. Apologies to people from her past, memories she wanted to preserve. She'd written one to me, sealed it in a small wooden box, and told her daughter that if life ever gave her the chance, she should deliver the message. I didn't think I'd ever see that letter, but Claire had taken a photo of it and sent it to me. The paper was old, yellow at the edges, her handwriting still as neat and careful as I remembered. The first line read, "Dear Jack, if you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to face you." I must have read that line 10 times before I could keep going. She wrote about fear, the fear of staying in a small town forever, the fear of missing out on something bigger. She wrote about how Thomas had offered her comfort and certainty, but that comfort came with a cost. "I thought love would hold me back," she wrote. "I didn't understand that love was the only thing worth holding on to." By the time I reached the second page, the words began to blur. I blinked hard, forcing myself to read. She said she'd followed my life from afar, heard about the garage, my parents, my quiet bachelor life. "I used to tell myself you moved on," she wrote, "but part of me prayed you hadn't because I didn't either." Her letter ended simply, "I hope you found peace, Jack. You deserved the kind of love I wasn't brave enough to give." I put the phone down and just sat there. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in with all the years I'd tried to forget. I hadn't cried in decades, but I did then. Not for what I lost, but for everything she carried alone. I don't know how long I sat there before I picked up the ring again. The silver band caught the morning light, the engraving faint but visible. EC. My hands shook as I whispered, "You're still here, Em. After all this time, you're still here." Claire messaged again later that evening. She told me her mother had passed peacefully in her sleep, holding that same photograph of the two of us at the county fair. It was a picture I hadn't seen since 1975. Me, standing beside her at the ring toss booth, grinning like a fool, and Emily laughing so hard she could barely stand. I asked if she still had it. She said she did. A moment later, my phone lit up with the image. There we were. Two kids frozen in a moment before the world got complicated. On the back of the photo, written in faded ink, were the words, "The man I should have married." For a second, I couldn't breathe. I touched the screen, tracing the shape of her handwriting. I remembered the sound of her laugh, the way her hair would catch sunlight. All those tiny pieces of her I thought time had stolen came rushing back like they'd been waiting behind a door only her daughter could open. I whispered, "You never forgot me." And for the first time since 1978, I believed it. That night I framed the photo and placed it beside my parents' picture on the shelf. The ring went back into its box, but this time it didn't feel like a symbol of heartbreak. It felt like the final page of a story that had finally been read aloud. For 44 years, I thought love was something that ended when someone walked away. But holding that letter, seeing her handwriting again, I understood something I'd missed my whole life. Love doesn't end, it just changes form. Sometimes it turns into silence, sometimes into a lesson. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, it comes back to tell you it never really left. The morning after I read Emily's letter, the world felt strangely still. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen blinds, dust floating in the air like tiny memories refusing to settle. For years, mornings had all blended together: coffee, silence, the hum of the refrigerator. But that day felt different. The silence didn't ache anymore. It rested. I made a cup of coffee and took it out to the porch. The air was cool and damp, the kind of early Ohio autumn that smells like wet leaves and change. I sat in the same spot where Emily and I used to talk about our future, legs dangling off the old steps, heart full of what-ifs. Only now, the ache wasn't sharp. It was gentle. It's strange how forgiveness doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up with fireworks or tears. It creeps in quietly, like morning light slipping through curtains. For years, I thought forgiveness meant letting go of anger. But sitting there, I realized it's more than that. It's giving yourself permission to stop living inside the moment that broke you. Later that week, I drove down to the lake in Brookside. I hadn't been there in decades. The gravel road was overgrown, the wooden dock half-rotted, but the water was calm, same as it always was. I parked the truck and walked to the edge, holding the little velvet ring box in my hand. I thought about how life can circle back when you least expect it. About how a single photograph, a message from a stranger, can reopen a story you thought was long closed. I opened the box and stared at the ring. After all these years, it hadn't lost its shine. I smiled at that. I spoke quietly to the water, as if she could hear me. "You were right, Emily. You wanted a future. I just didn't realize we had one. It just looked different than I imagined." I set the ring down on the wooden dock beside me and watched the sunlight catch the silver. For a second, I imagined her sitting next to me again, the way she used to, feet in the water, eyes half closed, talking about the things we'd do someday. Only this time, I didn't reach for her. I just let the moment be. When I finally stood to leave, I didn't take the ring with me. I tucked the box under the rail of the dock, safe from the rain. I figured it belonged there, between the past and the present, exactly where we left our plans all those years ago. On the drive home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: gratitude. Not for the heartbreak, but for having loved someone deeply enough to still feel her in the air decades later. That kind of love doesn't fade. It just settles into your bones, a quiet reminder of what it means to have lived. A few days later, Claire wrote to say she had scattered her mother's ashes at the same lake. She thanked me for helping her understand the kind of love her mother always talked about. She said you taught her what it meant to be truly seen, she wrote. I told her the truth, that her mother had done the same for me. I think we both needed that closure. She lost a mother, and I lost the woman I thought I'd grow old with, but somehow, through that shared loss, we both gained something. Understanding. Since that day, I've started noticing things I used to overlook. The smell of engine oil reminds me of my father. The way the evening light hits the garage windows brings back my mother's voice. And every once in a while, I catch a glimpse of a young couple walking hand in hand, and I can't help but smile. Regret used to be a weight I carried. Now it feels more like a teacher. It showed me that love doesn't have to last forever to matter forever. I never married. People sometimes ask if I regret that, and I tell them no. My story just happened differently. I got to experience a love strong enough to survive time, distance, even silence. That's more than most people ever get. These days, I still stop by the lake a few times a year. I sit on the dock, watch the water ripple, and think about how far life can stretch between one heartbeat and the next. The ring's still there, tucked safely beneath the wood. Every now and then, when the light hits just right, I can almost see it glint. And I like to think that somewhere, wherever she is, she knows. That maybe, in some small way, we both finally found what we were looking for. Peace. The truth is, love doesn't always give you the ending you expect. Sometimes it gives you something better. A story worth remembering, a lesson worth keeping, and the quiet understanding that some hearts never really let go. As the sun sets behind the trees, I whisper one last thing to the wind. You were right to go, Emily, but thank you for coming back, even if it was only through your daughter. Then I sit there in the fading light, the water calm, the world still, and for the first time in 44 years, I feel whole. Some stories don't end with grand gestures or second chances. They end quietly, with understanding, forgiveness, and the kind of peace that takes a lifetime to find. If this story touched you, or reminded you of someone you once loved, take a moment to share it. You never know who might need to hear it tonight. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about love, loss, and the moments that shape us, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive